Greetings, members one and all of the Salivation Nation. Silver's recovery. Could it be this week? Let's explore. By the time you see this video, it will be the middle of the week, and there's not many days left before the price could recover from the big crash that we saw and covered live on this very channel on Sunday evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Time when the Hong Kong markets open up, which is 9 a.m. Monday. But nonetheless, the question is, well, this big drop that we've seen, and through pretty much the first half of the week, we've seen the prices stay fairly low. Silver comfortably below the $24 level. Now, by the time this video is actually seen, well, one of three things could happen. And I'm guaranteed to be right about this. That prices will either edge up a bit, go down a bit, or stay the same. And more than likely, they're not going to go crazy as at the time you see this video, but they could go crazy by the end of the week for a couple of different reasons. We're going to be referencing an article here from FX Empire about these prices. Have they seen how they've edged lower following this flash crash? And we saw the prices drop nearly $1 an ounce. In fact, they were over $1 for the time we watched it live. The dollar moved higher. The euro moved lower following a softer than expected German zoo survey. The yield differential moved in favor of the greenback as U.S. yields continue to rise ahead of this week's inflation data. And there's your answer, folks. Later in this week, investors will need to calculate CPI, PPI, and import prices. But that's just it. It's the dollar index, and the strength of the dollar compared to the breadbasket of other currencies is really the biggest and most immediate driver of prices for gold and silver. Now, we're focusing on silver in this video because it does tend to be more volatile. In fact, if you look at a chart, most days we see silver take a bigger hit or take a bigger bump when there's a movement, especially drastic movement in the prices, one way or the other. And so there's where we're at. And there is this data that's expected this week. And who knows, usually when there's data that's released, there's also revisions as well. There's going to be a deluge of U.S. inflation data scheduled to be released on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. Consumer prices, producer prices, and import prices should show that inflation remains elevated in the United States. Last week, the labor market reported that wage inflation in the U.S. has increased 4% year over year. Stronger than anticipated inflation data will likely put upwards pressure on U.S. yields and buoy the dollar. Since silver is priced in U.S. dollars, a stronger dollar will weigh on silver. But the thing, that's just it. So that could buoy the dollar, keeping it afloat. So that could be a negative for silver. But usually higher inflation and sustained inflation does spook the markets. And even if the dollar index does go up, there are times when we'll see the markets react in the opposite direction and people may buy more. But keep in mind, a lot of this is occurring in the paper markets. And that kind of buying does offset some of the silver buying in the physical markets. As we've seen, we saw that happen with the silver squeeze movement. And that's, in a sense, it was one of the few times where actual physical demand for precious metals, especially silver, has driven the price of silver up in the markets, even for a brief time. So you have to understand and separate those. And I believe, at least from the anecdotal evidence that I've seen, that people are not selling their silver, and that's a good thing. Hold on to the physical. If you've bought it and purchased it, don't get frustrated to sell it. You got to hold on tightly and don't let go. That's for sure, because we're going to start to see some activity at some time or another, I believe, in silver and gold. And I'm still relatively bullish on both metals through the end of the year. But could it be this week? We shall see. We'll find out because of this inflation data coming out. Now, there is another thing to consider, is that as we go into the third quarter, or finish out the third quarter and into the fourth quarter, this time last year is when there has been some positive economic data that came out in terms of economic activity, starting the slow recovery out of the coronavirus, especially with news about the vaccines coming late last year, or into the fall of last year. And so therefore, inflation data then may show it subsiding a bit or stabilizing. But I think that's only temporary. I think that those numbers will be transitory, because there's going to be other effects too that I think are going to pull on this thing. And I think that inflation is here to stay, and we're going to see real measures for year over year for inflation that's going to pretty much show that this thing is going to be with us for at least some time here, especially when we see these wage increases, wage inflation. Because typically once people see these wage increases, that's going to stick. If people are in 4% cost of living increase, that's not going to go away if they see some of that stabilize. And so we'll see how this all plays out. But I believe in the end, you start to see inflation increase or stay the same. That's going to put pressure again on the dollar and the faith of the dollar around the world, not just in the U.S., which means that could weaken the dollar. Maybe not this week, according to this analysis from FX Empire, but in due course, I think we could see it, and maybe even before the end of the week, the psychology of what these numbers may show, especially if they think that it will remain elevated in the United States. That's going to put some pressure. And I think that potentially people, both in the ETF and the paper markets and in the physical markets, will be picking up more silver. And again, silver does tend to react more wildly than gold in these cases. But if they're saying and they're thinking that there's going to be pressure on silver's price to go down or stay the same or go down further from this, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I guess it's a possibility at the very beginning, which means it may be next week before we see them go up. But where will it go? This is why I'm asking it in the form of a question, as it could it be this week, or could it be next week, or the week after? But I do believe that we're starting to see at least the bottoms of these prices play out, and somewhat of a recovery or a correction of the markets. What do those numbers look like for corrections? I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,800 for gold and $25 for silver. But we'll have to see, get back to those numbers first before we can talk about where I had originally predicted both silver and gold to go by the end of the year, or at least touch on those prices by the end of the year. Because remember, towards the end of the year, we start to see the prices pull back a little bit too, as people are focused on the holidays. And there may be more commerce and maybe more activity coming up, and as we head into the holidays this year that we didn't see last year as much. But who knows? Anything can happen. Anything can change. Regardless, again, as is always the case, no matter what or the timing of silver's recovery is, there will be a recovery. And we know that it's all about wealth preservation in the long term. And how do you preserve your wealth in a time like this when the prices are depressed for gold and silver? Well, you buy more of it. You buy a little bit more of it when you can afford to do so, to lower your dollar cost average. And that's what it's about. I've been hearing anecdotally from many of my viewers that they are buying more silver in these times. 100 ounces at a time, a tube here, a couple of bars there. Every little bit helps to help offset what you have as premiums start to decline a little bit too. And I know, even though I've not really seen it out there, there's got to be some people who are frustrated with these prices. And I can understand that for sure. It is understandable. And this is why I've never been one of those to overly hype silver's price and momentum. I believe in being realistic about silver, because these kind of dips are possible for sure, and they will happen again more than likely. But silver will also jump up in price too. It's just the nature of the beast. It's a volatile time for precious metals, and especially silver, as it's kind of a tug of war between silver as a commodity and silver as a monetary metal. In the end, we will hold on, we will press on, we will continue to stack this metal for its beauty, for what it has done to service, and for thousands of years as a store of wealth and as a monetary metal. So there you have it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. I would like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for taking the time to watch, and to encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.